All right, we are live. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. Remember, you can go ahead and throw up where you guys are from. I always like to see where you guys are listening from. So far, we have Moscow, Slovenia, and England. All my Euro bros in here right now. Just retweeting my live stream, and then we'll get started. Hopefully, everybody is having a good day. All right. Welcome in, everybody. We have a lot to talk about today. Hello from Netherlands. Hello from Aladdis. I don't know what that is. London, UK. Land of the free. Libya. Nice. Sicily. Nice. Hola. Aka. Hello from Ireland. Vermont. Nice. Nice, guys. It's good to see everybody in here today. We got one Ameribro at least. Seattle, Washington, two Ameribros. It's 4 p.m. Oh, did I say 2 p.m. Eastern time on my thing? Dang it. My bad. Oops. My bad, everybody. 4 p.m. Eastern time. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's my bad. Yeah, doesn't matter. Whatever. Oops. Hello from Honduras. Hello from Montreal, Canada, Michigan. Greetings, everybody. All right, guys, we can get into it. So we have quite a bit to talk about today. A ton of map updates, as you can tell by the thumbnail, but also a lot of political updates, right? We're talking about the meeting between Russian and U.S. officials in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. That did take place. Lavrov was there. Marco Rubio was there from the United States. So a lot of high-level talks going on. We're going to talk about what happened with those talks, talk about the situation. I'm going to give my opinion on what I think is going on and how I can see this going forward. But yeah, there's a ton of moving pieces right now. Things are very chaotic. And I'm just trying to get all my information straight before I come and deliver it to you guys. So I appreciate your patience and welcome in, everybody. Cheers from Broken Arrow. Oh, that's not good. That's the last place you want to be. All right. Yeah. Please like and subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already. I really appreciate it. It helps me out a ton. Oops. All right. Let's go ahead and get into the map updates, shall we? We have a significant number of map updates today. So up here in the Kursk region, we have a small Russian advance just capturing the rest of Servedikovo. In the Kursk region, again, just beginning to apply more pressure towards this R200 road, which is the only open line of logistics for the Ukrainians into the Kursk region. I see really no appetite for the Russians to close this right now. Because the videos coming out, the number of Russian fiber optic drones up in this area are insane. I've watched multiple compilations now of fiber optic drones flying into warehouses and destroying a whole like platoon's worth of vehicles basically in these warehouses and stuff. So in my personal opinion, there's no reason for the Russians to close this pocket. I would just keep applying pressure if I were the Russians and force the Ukrainians to continue bleeding here, because that is really all they are doing in this area. They're not accomplishing any defensive objectives, like they need to in the east, and they're not achieving anything significant by sitting in Zdruzhda. So really, this is just completely pointless in my opinion. And the Ukrainians are suffering for it. And I don't know why the Russians would, prevent that from continuing, especially because there's no real possibility. Like if it was this entire area of Kursk that was under Ukrainian control, that would be more concerning for me if I was the Russians, because the Ukrainians might be able to break out in any number of directions, cause some chaos. Right now, the Russians can watch every single piece of equipment that comes in and out of their country right here. And the only area to stage is in Struzda. And then we saw what happened when they tried to go on the offensive. They went for, Ulanak right here and didn't achieve that. And now they've been pushed back. So, again, no point for the Russians to close this. The Ukrainians are suffering so heavily across the front because of this. They might as well just let it continue. All right, moving down to the Oskal bridgehead, which I'm almost done calling it a bridgehead. It's almost not a bridgehead anymore. This is almost just a new section of front. The Russians are very much established across the river. In some areas, we're looking at 4 miles, 5 miles out to the very extent of the Russian control. But remember, gray zone goes out a little bit further than that as well. So there's a lot of territory being captured here outside of Dobrivka for the Russians, as well as south of Zapadne here. The Russians are moving in the direction of Kupiansk. I'm actually going to adjust this because I do not believe that the Russians have full control in the city here. I believe that there is a lot of DRG activity, but there's not a full Russian control in the city. So I'm actually just going to back this off. I forgot to do this earlier, and I'll correct it to an absolute point as soon as I get geolocations. But I'm just going to back the Russians out of the city because the report I read today is that there are Russian DRG units operating in this area all the time, but they don't have firm control over this area because the Ukrainians are still present and still cross. All right. Moving down and remember, guys, this is just kind of the non-focused area of the front. So this progress right here is not through super aggressive offensive actions. The Russians are just finding weak points in the Ukrainian lines and then actively advancing when the Ukrainian defense becomes weak. Right, moving down here to the Yampolivka turning area. Russian forces have completed the capture of Yampolivka. They've closed this small pocket just up to the north. And this basically means now that the front line is Torsk here, as well as, this opposite side of the Zhibyets River and these reservoirs right here. So the pocket along the Zhibyets River is finally closing, and the Russians are now going to be poised to begin pushing into Torsk towards Liman and also the Shubiansky forestry right here, which will compromise the Seversk salient. And then once Seversk is compromised, the Russians can begin working on Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. All right, a pretty big movement here by the Russians in the Chasiv Yar area. Russian forces have advanced in the direction of Stupochke. Again, you're going to see sort of a not really a pocket because there's not a ton of Ukrainians in this area, just enough to, hold the line sort of deal. But this pocket is going to be the next sort of area that the Russians begin to focus on as they begin to advance out of Chasiv Yar here, as is shown with this green polygon. But when I click here, we can see that this is directly, as I talked about, in the direction that was intended to actually cut off New York and Donetsk. But as we've seen with Avdiivka and with New York and Donetsk, this prediction became less important the second the Russians completed their tunneling operation through the sewers or whatever pipage they went through into New York and got behind this defensive wall right here. So now the flanks aren't as important. They're more important to attack Kostyantynivka. But as we can see, the Russians are advancing in that area that I had outlined earlier. Okay. Moving down into the Donetsk area here over in Shubianivka, Russian forces have just advanced out of the area of these Terikons and captured more of this village right here. Again, it's just sort of the greater Donetsk conglomerate, but the Russians are moving along the low ground here through this urban area. Okay, moving over to the ring road. Russian forces have captured the village of Berzivka, Berezivka, as well as completed the capture of the ring road in its entirety and have moved up the highway and along these fields in the direction of Yelizvetivka. Again, this is just important because this is going to become the northern pincer of the Minhorod Pokrovsk encirclement. Obviously, we have the I guess eastern northern pincer, and then we have the western pincer over here, which will eventually become a northwestern pincer as well, and encircling this conglomerate. But I would not expect, again, a ton of movement here. There are a lot of fortifications that I actually need to outline up in this area. So there's still fortifications that the Russians have to work through. This map is a little deceiving with the fortifications in this area in particular, as well as this area. There are a ton of fortifications here. But many more movements south. The Russians are going to be getting into a pretty thick defensive structure here, as well as close proximity to staging points for the Ukrainians. And they have pretty easy logistics down the T0504. And same goes on this backside, guys. Just a small update here. Pashani has been recaptured after a Russian assault pushed the Russians back out of the industrial area. That's been recaptured now. A note that I've seen people talking about is that the the Russian offensive in this area somehow slowed down and faltered or died or something like that. I've seen a couple people talking about this, and I don't really understand that. When you're looking at this part of the map, you have to understand that the Russian logistics for this entire area right here are coming out of Seladove now, right? So the Russians have to go about, 22, 23 kilometers to the front in this area. So to like continue wrapping up around Pokrovsk, right? And the way the Russians have to do that is they have to take like these little dirt roads that are not particularly good. Ukrainian artillery and FPVs watch this entire area. I would not expect a ton of Russian movement in this area any longer, right? Until the Ukrainians are so weak that they just give up on Pokrovsk and Minhorod, basically, which would be this is such a critical area now for the Ukrainians. It's really like an Ugledar now in the south. I would not expect a ton of Russian progress out in this area, right? You're just getting too far away from your nearest stable logistics point. Whereas the Ukrainians are operating logistics directly out of Pokrovsk. They have all of these roads. They know this area. They have their defensive fortifications. This is, it's like home turf. So don't expect a ton of Russian progress here and here because the Ukrainians have the easiest time defending this area. Instead, we can come down here and see where a lot more progress is taking place because the Ukrainians have a much more difficult time running logistics to this area, particularly because of this pincer here that has pushed up into Pokrovsk. The Ukrainians can no longer run logistics from Pokrovsk down into Mezova and then down this way. Instead, they have to run it from Propoznaya right here, Prozayana, and that's the nearest really stable and built up logistics location. If you look at all of these villages, I mean, you can run some logistics. There are some warehouses, but these are going to be primary targets for Russian bombings, as well as there's just not a ton of space. So running massive logistics enough to hold this entire front in a stable position is very difficult from this area. So this pincer, all of these movements are kind of interlinked. They all serve to help each other. But I would just not expect a ton of progress around Pokrovsk right now. This area is easy for the Ukrainians to defend and costly for the Russians to push in. They'll just push somewhere else, as we're seeing here in the south and up in the north. All right, here north of Andrivka, the Russian forces, this is a little deceiving, this map. I don't know if they necessarily have the fields captured, but these tree lines here, the Russians have progressed up all of these tree lines, so I just filled it in. Russians have advanced in the tree lines north of Andrivka. Again, this pocket north of Andrivka is now likely going to close. just because the Ukrainians have like this, I guess, whatever this is, this little dirt road here, kind of to run logistics into this area, but it's just difficult. So again, this is what we're talking about when I say that there's when you get out of the eastern part of Ukraine, it's just flat open steppe. That's what we're starting to see, and that's what the Russians are now taking advantage of. All right, moving down into sort of the disaster area. Ukrainian sources. I'm going to take us over, and I'm going to read off some Ukrainian sources from my bookmarks that I have on Twitter. I've posted these on Twitter. You can go follow me there if you wanted to find more updates. I'm going to take you through a little bit of a timeline over the last 48 hours. So, did you say Scott doesn't zoom out enough? What do you want me to zoom out to? What? I zoom in so you guys can see like the detail. Here, Russian forces have closed the pocket west of Deshane. You know, this should have been closed a very long time ago. And you're going to read that this was an absolute disaster for the Ukrainians. I had been talking about it for like a month, it felt like, at least. How bad this situation had gotten. Really, the progress into Andrivka had made this pocket uninhabitable, but the Ukrainians just kept pumping men in, and eventually, as the Russians advanced up into Kostyantynivka here and then Andrivka to the north, this pocket just became a disaster. The Ukrainians had no medevac out. They could only get men into Ulaki, and then the men would travel along this road. There are destroyed vehicles all along this road, which I hope we get a video of a car ride from Deshane to Ulaki, because it's not too far. It's just a couple of fields, and we can see how many vehicles are just destroyed along this road because they were getting hit by FPVs from both sides, artillery from both sides. I've seen videos of vehicles getting hit here, so we know it did happen for sure. And the Ukrainians were not able to escape. The Russians advanced into Ulaki, while the Ukrainians were still in these fortifications. There were surrenders in this area. There were basically like the whole garrison that was in this area was destroyed. This is not this is not me saying this. This is coming from Ukrainian sources, so I'm not like just making this stuff up. And then down here, we can see that the Russian forces have advanced into Kostyantynivka and have encircled whatever garrison is left in the northern half of the village. As you can see here, it's bordered by the Vovocha River, so they either have to cross the river or cross these weird like ditches right here. I think they're like estuary runoffs for, I don't know, agriculture. I don't know if these fields... I don't know if it's just like I don't know what it is, like a overrun area or something like that, but very difficult to pass through here. It's very tight with the Russian presence on the road in these houses, and then also the Russian presence to the north. Any movement out of this area is going to be noticed by the Russians. So again, a very difficult situation. Ukrainians, again, finding themselves in yet another pocket just due to complete lack of leadership's will to order retreats. That's basically all it is. All right. So yeah, this has been a complete disaster since the last time I did a live stream, which was on Thursday, I think last week, or Wednesday or Thursday of last week. So this has just progressively got worse, and it's not going to get much better. Let me actually go over and read some of those tweets that I was talking about. Okay. So right here, actually, let's start with February 15th. Yeah. Okay. No, let's start with this one. Okay. Okay. A Ukrainian source talking about the situation for the AFU in Kostyantynivka. So that's the town that is currently dealing with the encirclement. This is back on the 15th. So this is 3 days ago. The remnants of the Khodakove direction, also known as the Kostyantynivka direction, are living out their last days. Between the village of Sukiyali and the Vovocha River, the enemy is trying to close the encirclement ring of our garrison for our garrison, which is still defending west of Deshane. The defense of the village itself has already been completed, but regardless, battles continue on the way to Ulakili. So that's that village that has now been fully captured. The asshole situation has not stopped for the second month in the entire direction. So the situation has been dire for a month, right? That's basically what he's saying. It's been that bad for a month. As for Ulakli itself, it is unlikely that the defense there will last long. It did not, because there is already another threat of encirclement, and the scum Russians have also crept into the village. Also, when the enemy has already entered and is accumulating in Kostyantynopol, the only question is whether the entire garrison will be able to escape from the next sack. So, as you can see, this is what I've been talking about for a long time, how bad the situation is, how dire it is, and it's not getting any better for the Ukrainians. So here's an update on the same day from the same source. The situation on the Constantinople route is extremely critical. We can't keep stepping on the same rake and repeating the same mistakes. Ugledar, Mariupol, Soledar, Bakhmut, Velika Novosilka. I can go on. Kursk currently. I can go on. I can go on. I can go on. We cannot afford to lose many of our soldiers for the sake of good reports upstairs. And this is where I don't understand the disconnect. It's not about good reports going upstairs. This is not a Vietnam situation where the leadership is out of touch with what's happening on the front line, and they're demanding, and the people that are delivering these reports want to make the situation seem better. I doubt that's what's happening. I think that the guys are very clear that the situation is bad. Everybody knows that the situation is bad, and the Ukrainian leadership is telling them to take this path because they don't want the negative PR from losing territory. So this is where I disagree with this source in his thinking, but it is what it is. Urgent decisions need to be made there to prevent the disaster that is brewing. I don't know how much longer I have to suffer with the Donetsk OTU, which is the operating area. So like the Southern Donetsk area of command. So exactly what I mean, literally the title of our live stream today is Donetsk disaster, because that's exactly what is happening. All right, so here's from the next day, the 16th, the Ukrainian source on the collapsed Kharkov pocket. So from the 15th to the 16th, the pocket had collapsed. While we're going for record breaking, I don't know what to say anymore. It's hard to understand that we can't help yet. The guys from near Kharkov are in real hell, trapped and on almost all sides. Help is urgently needed for the boys. Spoiler alerts, help never came. And then this is from 18 hours ago. Ukrainian source on the general situation in southern Donetsk. On the remains of the Kharkov sack, there is no good news, and there will be none. Counterattacks in Ulakli have failed. The village was practically captured. Everything that is up to Ulakli from Deshani's side is lost. In Constantinople, our soldiers are holding the road in the southern part of the village and the approaches to it. In all other points of the village, enemy infantry, which had already accumulated, normally infiltrated. One of our brigades and the separate units and another were added to the direction, but they were unable to complete the tasks. There are problems with interaction, infantry, and chaos in management. Okay, guys, this is super important right here. Very clearly stated. One of our brigades and separate units of another. So when you have manpower issues, what ends up happening is you're just throwing guys together to solve problems and plug holes, right? So he's talking about a brigade that is stationed in the area, and then separate units that were brought in to help support this brigade, because the brigade's probably at 1/3 strength, and these units are all at 1/3 strength, and they can muster something if they get them all in one place. They're saying that there's massive communication problems. Obviously, there's probably huge training differences. You have a brigade that might be a more professional brigade mixed in with, territorial defense units who can't hold their positions and just completely destroy the defensive structure that you're trying to establish in an area, or your ability to counterattack is completely negated by the inability to communicate with the unit next to you. So the commander of the Donetsk OTU, Donetsk Operating Zone, Tarnavsky, received a fiery greeting from the guys who were first forgotten in one of the villages and then were not given the go to leave. So, they were forgotten as in they don't care about them. They left them, and then not given the go to leave. So no order to retreat was issued by command. And there's a very clear reason why, and that's because Zelensky ordered commanders to not retreat from areas. They have no retreat orders. So why are there no longer these problems in the north of the Donetsk OTU area of responsibility, but in the south of the same OTU's area, they put a bolt which caused a catastrophe? So he's basically blaming the leadership for what's happening in the southern Donetsk area, even though, the Russians aren't pushing in the northern Donetsk area the same as they're pushing in the south. And, the geography is different, and the Russian units there are different than the Russian units up in the north. None of that matters. You have to blame somebody. So he's blaming the military leadership in this region. You can't do that to our fighters, to the best fighters. I mean, I don't mind them for blaming him because he is following those orders, which are basically criminal orders, getting your own men killed. Because in that bag were some of the most trained brigades. Yeah. So in that Kharkov pocket were some of the best brigades that Ukraine had that aren't currently in Kursk. Those men were slaughtered for nothing. In fact, we now have the frontline equation on the enemy side and a good bridgehead for an attack on both the Filofrutsk Triangle and Holyai-Polye. Oh, and the left flank of Pokrovsk is now completely and finally secured by the swamp scum. So he's saying that the entire southern direction from Pokrovsk down to Velika Novosilka and Holyai-Polye in Zaporozhye even is completely exposed. Okay. So that's sort of I have one more that I'm going to read, but this is sort of the situation. So here is the last update we got an hour ago. Ukrainian sources on the collapse around Andriivka, which is the Kostyantynivka area, whatever. And then so he asks a question in here, and I'll answer it at the end. Unfortunately, not everyone left Ulakli. So that's the village that got captured. They are dead and captured. Yep, like as I said, this could have been prevented if the order to leave the bag had been given in time. This is true, but it was not done, as it has never been done throughout the entirety of this conflict. I don't know why they expect something different now. Because General Tarnavsky, as the commander of the Donetsk OTU, needed good reports from above that we have everything under control here, and in fact, control over the situation was lost 2 weeks ago, and the further it went, the more it escalated. And here's the question. If the operational situation after the losses of Andriivka unit indicated the possibility of encirclement, why did the OTU so stubbornly refuse to evacuate the garrison? Why did the situation get so bad? Can we all say it together here, everybody? Can we all say it as a group? It got so bad because the orders from the top were to let it get to that point. That was the orders. Stay here. Do not retreat. Hold this for as long as possible. We're heading into negotiations. We don't want to lose this area before negotiations because it could really set us back, and then the Russians could look like they're in a massive position of strength. Hold the line. I don't get why you're blaming military leadership when it's so very clear that military leadership is not making a single decision. If military leadership was making any decisions, what's his name? The ambassador to Britain now. Oh my God, the previous commander before Syrskyi. Somebody help me out. You guys know who I'm talking about. Mr. Bandera himself. He wants Zaluzhny, thank you. He would still be in charge because he was a better military leader than Syrskyi was, for sure. I mean, in terms of actually understanding that you need to retreat from a pocket and stuff. Thank you guys. His name slipped my mind. So that sort of is what I just wanted to talk about in the in that little segment there. All right, guys. All right. Let's take it over to. I wanted to show you guys. So I guess we could talk about the election a little bit. The election going on is interesting because of a couple reasons. What did I just say? Election negotiations. The negotiations that are going on. Sorry, I had three things going on in my brain. The negotiations that are going on right now in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The U.S. delegation has met the Russian delegation to talk about the future going forward with Ukraine. And there's a lot of turmoil happening around this because of what it means for different players involved, right? You have Europe, who is literally screwed. Europe is in such a terrible position. And I'm glad my Euro bros are in here today because you guys need to hear this. You guys are hooped. Not so much, I don't know about Eastern Europe as much, but France, Britain, and Germany are in a very, very bad position. We knew this was going to happen, but U.S.-Russian relations improving is a very, very bad thing for Europe. Something like, I can't remember who said it, but it was, keep Germany down, keep the U.S. trapped in Europe. That keep the Russians out, keep the U.S. trapped, and keep the Germans down. That's sort of the idea around where the Europeans are at, right? They've enjoyed for the last, at least, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, but at least it had some sort of importance at the time. But since the collapse of the Soviet Union, they've had 35 years of U.S. defense spending, basically covering their defense budgets. They've had, excellent social programs and universal health care and all of this stuff, which is fantastic because they were really under the umbrella of the United States' defense, right? Nuclear, our military, everything like that. And these countries in Europe, Britain, Germany, France, really enjoyed the power that came with being a U.S. vassal, basically. Like Britain especially went around pretending like they were actually something for the last 50 years when they have been nothing for a very, very long time. Not just militarily, but economically, the whole nine yards. So, these talks are very, very concerning. And I'm going to take us over and we're going to read some BBC articles or look at some BBC articles at least about at least the British viewpoint and perspective on what's happening, because they are really going to be huge losers here. There seems to be a growing divide between Europe and the United States under Trump, which is, I don't know if it's necessarily, it's good. I would say it's probably good for the United States. In that we are not going to be covering all of that fiscally. However, our geostrategic position is going to be much, much weaker, right? If we lose our firm grip over Europe, our entire sphere of influence is going to shrink. And I think that the U.S. is getting to a point where they're starting to accept that, at least in Europe. They're not accepting that in the Pacific. They're not going to accept that with China. But it seems like under Donald Trump, at least, and this could easily change in 4 years. And this is why what I'm going to say about negotiations here is going to make a lot more sense. But it does seem as though the U.S. is ready to just sort of, with the Ukraine situation, not so much that they want it to end necessarily, but they just need to shift their focus to the Pacific. They can't spend another year or two dealing with the Russians and trying to fight the Russians and beat the Russians and, focusing in that direction when the Chinese are the near peer that is growing and becoming a very, conflicting force in the region. So the talks are the worst for Europe. And Ukraine obviously has no say in what's happening. So that I almost don't even count Ukraine in this discussion at all. I don't think that they're a power broker. I think they're just being used. So Ukraine, Europe, and the NATO alliance is really looking at a damaging blow from these negotiations. But I want to make this very clear. I do not think that the Trump administration is all buddy buddy with Russia. I do not think that Russia should go through negotiations with the United States. I think that the United States has come to the table for one reason and one reason only, and it's because they have done the math and they understand that there is nothing beneficial for them that is going to come out of this. The only beneficial path forward is an off ramp. And that off ramp, if it doesn't come at an immense benefit for the Russians and the Russians accept it, like that's horrible. That's just you're in such a position of strength. It is so clear that you have your opponents exactly where you want them. The ball is in your court. You got the football, 2 minutes to go, you final drive, you're down by 3, right? I mean, you're not down at all. You're up by 10, really, if you're the Russians. But just for the metaphor here, you have control over your destiny right now. The Russians are in control of the battlefield. Their economy is stable. They can continue this for the foreseeable future. Any negotiation that doesn't immensely benefit Russia, I will be hypercritical of. I will be hypercritical of it because, again, we've seen this throughout the past 3 years and really the entirety of U.S. military history. The U.S. does not negotiate. They win wars and then they negotiate, right? If the only time they will negotiate or they will pull out is when they absolutely understand that there is no winning. They did that in Vietnam. They did that in Afghanistan. They're going to do it in Ukraine, and it is going. And the AFU is going to look the exact same as the ARVN, as the ANA, as the Kurds, right? The U.S. is also pulling out of Syria, so our allies, the Kurds, are also going to bite the bullet there. If I was Putin, I would just stay in the pocket that I'm in right now. You see how uncomfortable you're making everybody? Do you see how they're squirming and they're itching to get away from this at any cost? This is what the last 3 years of the blood and the sacrifice and everything and the patience and the deliberate actions have led up to. I hope that they're smart enough to understand this. But I have this feeling in my gut because there seems to be this cultural, and this is just my pure opinion on it. This is nothing factual. This is just what I have witnessed and seen. There seems to be this immense cultural divide between, Russian, Chinese, basically anybody who you would consider maybe an adversary of the United States. I think Iran has finally figured it out. But even, a year ago, Iran was talking about a nuclear deal, like getting back on a nuclear deal. It's crazy that you're still wanting to deal with these people who have time and time again shown that they cannot be dealt with in any manner, right? They'll make a deal with you and it'll look really good and sound really good. And then it'll never be, followed or abided by. And then it's just useless. So I don't think that negotiations benefit Russia at all right now, other than the fact that you can cause a lot of chaos by reestablishing good relations with the United States and not reestablishing good relations with Europe. That would really divide Europe and the United States, it makes Russia's job a lot easier in terms of their sphere of influence and their control of the region. It puts Europe in a very bad position, and then it gets the U.S. Off of Russia's case, kind of. It might allow for sanctions relief and just not a focus so that the Russian economy can become very strong, the Russian military can continue to progress, and the conflict in Ukraine can continue in the way that the Russians want it to. That's a little bit of copium for me. I hope that's the direction they go. But again, what I meant to say was that these cultures have this like gullibleness. I don't understand it. It seems like the West is constantly just tricking everybody and then pretending. It's like we pretend to be good. We're like, I don't even know what analogy I can use for it. We're like we're like a, almost like a, what do they call them? Like a succubus, like out at sea. We sing, we draw people in, and then we do something terrible, and there's stories about it, and then we just sing and sing and sing, and then they come back and they think everything's fine. I truly do not understand this line of logic where you think that you can deal with the US. Even let's just say that Trump is the outlier and Trump is actually going to do what he says he's going to do, and he actually wants to reestablish relations, and he actually doesn't want to go along with the neocon ideas, and he doesn't want to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities and all this and that, right? He is actually a different leader. I don't really think he is, but let's just say he is. What happens in 4 years? What happens in 8 years? What happens in 12 years? Right? You can't think about you can't think about ending things right now because it's good for you in this moment. You have to think about what is going to happen the next election cycle, and the one after that, and the one after that. Are we going to go right back to, is there going to be another rubber band where we go right back into what we were? Is there going to be a continuation of the Trump policy and stuff like that? We just don't know. And for any side, China in the future, Iran right now, any African country, probably any South American country, and Russia should not be making deals with the United States. That's just my personal opinion on it. And that comes from an American who benefits from all of those deals. If we get out of that Ukraine project, things are going to get better for me here, right? Energy prices are going to go down. All my cost of living is going to go down. Everything will get better, or it should. Everything will get better for me if this goes forward. So my personal bias should be for that not to happen, or for that to happen, right? For the US to get what it wants. But my analytical bias is just looking at what's best for each side. And in the conflict in Ukraine, the US is trying to remove itself, and Russia is winning. That's the foundation of what's happening there. So yeah, if you guys have some questions, go ahead and get some questions in. Let me just go over and show you guys these articles. We don't really have to read them, but both of these are from the BBC. And I just wanted to take a look at them. So Moscow back at the table and appearing to call the shots. So a very negative article coming out from the BBC, basically saying Moscow's in charge at the negotiating table, which they are. I don't understand why you would think they're not, when you clearly even yourself stated that they are in the position of strength in the Ukraine conflict. The sight of senior Russian and American officials back around the giant negotiating table is extraordinary. See, they don't want this. This is the death of Britain right here. Britain losing its, it's like its big brother, right? The little brother that always picks fights and then thinks that he's super tough and nobody wants to fight him, but really it's because his big brother is standing right behind him the entire time. That's going away for Britain, and Britain can't allow that. The goal for Europe is to keep America in Europe at any cost. And I would not put it past them to, go about some false flag operation in Ukraine or in Russia in order to force the United States to stay in Europe, because it's so beneficial to the European economies. And just recently, the Defense Secretary of the United States, I can't remember what his name is, he's got that huge tattoo, he basically came out and said that Europe has to prepare for American troops not to be in Europe anymore. And that is like the nightmare scenario for the EU right now for European countries. So, all right, we got a question here. Any negotiations set at a precedent that America can repeat this proxy war anywhere, and Russia will just negotiate the peace? Bad optics. No, I don't think that's necessarily the truth. I think that there can be a number of reasons for this negotiation to be going on. One can just be so that the U.S. can literally just wipe their hands of this. If the situation is as bad as I think it is, The ability just to, wipe your hands and move on from this would be very, very beneficial. And it would also be like, look, we tried to negotiate, but Europe and Ukraine, they want to keep going. That's their deal. We're out of this. We can reestablish relations with Russia, bring energy prices down, this, that, or the other, whatever they need to do. If Russia got a really good deal out of it, if Russia got the 4 blasts, a massive amount of sanctions relief, and then, there is an actual transition of American troops out of Europe, and sort of the NATO alliance starts to really get broken up because of just like the trust and the lack of commitment from both sides, that would be a massive win for Russia. And that would be, I don't think that sets any precedent. I think that sets the US back immensely, and is a huge win for the Russians. We'll see what comes out of it. But yeah, I think that if the Russians accept a less than ideal negotiated settlement, they will set a precedent that would be very bad. Yes, I do agree. You can go to war with us at any time, and as long as you say you're sorry, we're going to agree and reestablish relations and everything, even if it has to be a defeat, right? It has to be a win for the Russians. Trump giving the Falklands to Melania would be a pro gamer move of all time. That's what I want to do a little bit of stand-up comedy eventually, and I was just writing a little piece thing, a little joke about Argentinian ants, because they're an invasive species, and feeling like Margaret Thatcher destroying all of these ants. But yeah, so it would be a pro gamer move. I think that would be hilarious. It would be hilarious if the British went to war with Argentina again. Scott, I've got a really bad feeling, knowing the history of Russian deals with the West, that it's going to be bad as well. Yep, that's my feeling as well. And like I said, I'm going to be hyper critical of this deal, because fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me Budapest Memorandum, fool me Minsk 2, fool me all the other times I've been fooled, and you're a goddamn fool. So we'll see how it goes forward. Sean Penn broke down weeping on Zelensky's shoulder. It was heartbreaking. Yeah, truly sad. Poor guys. Scott is straight up anti-American. Yeah, I guess. I don't think I'm anti-American. I think I'm just speaking from a purely third-person perspective on the topic, a purely analytical perspective. If I wanted to, I could just be here like rah, rah, Russia, or rah, rah, Ukraine, or rah, rah, America, but that's not really very helpful to anybody. Hey, Scott, have you heard the Ukrainian French trained brigade and out of Kiev is suffering from desertion? Yeah, that was a couple months ago that all started to come out. Yeah, that whole brigade kind of disintegrated. Fool me once, you can't be fooled again. Now watch this shot. Pink. Goat president, by the way. He didn't even have to do anything, man. Cheney was running all of his evil shit. Bush was just enjoying it. That's what's up. Question: will Zelensky try to force his way into the U.S. plus Russia meeting in Saudi Arabia, or false flag? I think that he's in Saudi Arabia after the meeting, so he's already there to try to, I don't know, figure out what they talked about. He's got a glass up to the wall. No, I don't know. I don't know what his plans are. But we'll just see. I think this is just a time will tell, honestly. This could literally amount to nothing, because they didn't actually talk about that much. This was just a first, basically thawing the ice on relations kind of meeting. I mean, I'm sure they talked about Ukraine and how to proceed and stuff like that, but this stuff takes months usually. Scott, Russians blew up a cheese factory in Ukraine. All that's left is the brie. Oh no. Scott is not anti-American. He's just speaking from a PR. Okay. There we go. Yanks absolutely slammed the Americans with 500 billion of Treaty of Versailles war reparations. Did the Ukrainians think they could defeat the U.S.? Yeah, I just think it's funny because I was sitting here telling everybody for months and months and months and months that this was going to happen. It's like, it's not Ukraine. It's not even Ukraine's fault. The U.S. just does this to proxies. And yeah, it's just funny. It's like we have this amazing ability in the United States that every 4 years we have elections and the whole government sometimes changes, and like the entire administration and the entire path forward. Like the deep state doesn't change, but and a new administration doesn't want the burdens of a past administration. Like Putin has to deal with Ukraine for the rest of the time he's in power, right? He had to deal with Chechnya the rest of the time he wanted to be in power, and he's been in power for like 25 years. So, but in the U.S., it's like Trump gets in and he's like, I don't want Ukraine on my resume. Like that's not my problem. It's not my deal. I didn't start it. So, yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what they thought was going to happen, and they probably should have just given them that money. It would have been hilarious if we would have just robbed them right before we left. We funneled money through their laundromat, and then right before we left, we swiped everything they had. Hey Scott, is an expanded NATO, Poland, Romania, Hungary somehow more acceptable to a NATO Western Ukraine? Yes, absolutely, because that means that the alliance decided to territorially expand. Well, no, not the alliance. Individual members of the alliance decided to territorially expand into a nation that had they had all recently been talking about how bad it was that another nation tried to territorially expand into it. Yes, that would be absolutely acceptable from the Russian position, because it would probably mean a further deterioration of the NATO alliance as a whole. So you might have NATO closer for a couple of years, but it might be the end of NATO in the long run. And you can read that in these articles on the BBC, right? Let's see. Even as air raid sirens sound across Ukraine, that's exactly the image Moscow wants to present. The whole time they're talking about negotiations, and this isn't actually the one that I wanted to discuss. The one I wanted to discuss was over here, I think. Jeremy Brown, no sign of a quick peace dividend for Trump in Ukraine. The Russians and Americans are talking again as European leaders and diplomats contemplate the hard choices forced on them by U.S. President Donald Trump. Oh, the hard choices forced on us. Yeah, no, this is just exactly what it's like. Could they just watch my show? Could they just watch my show for like 5 seconds? They would have known all of this months in advance. I doubt negotiations will start in earnest with Kursk being occupied. Yeah, I'll get to your question in just a second, homie. Let me just finish this. Without question, Trump's diplomatic ultimatum to Ukraine and America's Western European allies has cracked the transatlantic alliance, perhaps beyond repair. Right there, guys. Right there. So this is the BBC, the British Broadcasting Network, talking about the transatlantic NATO alliance being damaged beyond repair because of what is about to happen to Europe, the way that the US is just going to dump this whole problem on Europe, and Europe is losing their defender, their big bully that protects them and allows them to project their sphere of influence beyond the scope and of their own capabilities, basically. But yeah, that is very telling when you read this in an article. It's like the US is now slowly becoming the enemy, whereas Russia is just kind of the it's like in a zombie apocalypse where Russia is sort of the zombies to Britain, right? They're the constant threat all the time, but it's not as much of a threat as the people. like, in those zombie movies. So yeah. All right, let me go over to these questions. I doubt negotiations will start in earnest with the Kursk region being occupied. The 4 yeah, I don't think they're going to start because of a lot of reasons. I don't think they're going to start because the positions are just too far separated for everybody, right? But yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Okay. Will the EU try to sabotage negotiations, ceasefire in order to continue the conflict? I fully believe that they will, especially that the way that they're talking about it, the way that how afraid they sound about the direction Trump is going. The European goal right now is to keep America stuck in Europe. That's what they need. They need the American dollars. They need the Americans focused on Europe. That's what Europe needs, right? So yes, I fully would expect Britain especially to do something in that manner. They're already talking about sending troops in because they have no other options to manage the situation. It may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal. Harry Kissinger. Yes, sir. Have the Ukrainians not studied the Yanks' behavior? Nope. It appears nobody has. And if the Russians make a deal, it appears that the Russians haven't even learned from direct contact with that behavior as well. Rubio was talking about dropping sanctions earlier today, also restore the embassy's functioning. Yeah, this is what I meant. Just establishing relations with Russia is a major threat to Britain, to Germany, to France, and it will likely damage NATO severely. So, yeah, expect some desperation out of all sides here. Every superpower in the U.S. has done what, and every superpower in history has done what the U.S. has done. Read more history, Scott. Well, I talk about this constantly. What do you mean? I literally mentioned that Ukraine is like the U.S.'s Suez moment. Man, maybe if I had read history, I would know what a Suez moment was and what it meant for a previous empire. Crazy, huh? I know that I know that every superpower does this. I know that. What part of my statements here made you think that I didn't know that? I literally said you can't trust the West. I literally said that. I said that you can't do. I said Minsk 1, Minsk 2, the Budapest Memorandum, all of those different things. I've said all of those, right? That those are just within the last 20 years. I don't have to read history to know that empires do this. I have to just look at U.S. history to know that the U.S. empire does this. But yes, I do know that Britain, Rome, all of these powerful countries and empires throughout history have made these deals and have not followed through. If the EU sends troops in, they will get a vibe check. I wouldn't doubt it, honestly. Question: collab with Andrei Martinov? Yeah, I mean, I have no objections. I just don't reach out to a ton of people. I think it's kind of awkward, especially because a lot of the people in this sort of information space are just not super social, and they don't like to go talking to people and stuff like that, and they're not super open to going and talking to new people, so you have to lay groundwork and stuff like that. I'm just kind of chilling with the Duran and Brian right now. It's kind of, I have those two guys come on. I have had those two guys come on, or those two channels come on. I think that's kind of like where I want to keep it. Maybe AMK comes on sometimes if he wants. How many X's are in the size of my t-shirt? This one? I think this one is just an XL, but usually I wear double XLs and they look so big on me because they're meant for fat people. I'm just tall. The Duran is awesome. Yes, they are. I do enjoy the Duran. Scott and Denny's need to collab. Let's get it started. Let's see. If you guys have a few more questions, get some questions in. Let's see. What does this say? Zelensky's trip to the EU was a setup to set up this escape. I don't think so. I think that they're going to try to have elections, which will be funny. We need to see Scott to go Ben Shapiro mode on Navo. I think Andre Martinov would accept your invitation. I'll look into it. The New Atlas is the best channel. Yes, New Atlas is awesome. Go check him out. That's Brian. What are the objectives by crossing the Oskal north of Kupiansk? Applying pressure to the Ukrainians everywhere. That the Russians are just advancing where the Ukrainians are allowing them to advance and they're weak, right? Except in southern Donetsk, the Russians are pushing there pretty heavily. Should the North Koreans be at the negotiating too? Thanks for all the great work, Scott. Yeah, probably, man. Because they actually have skin in the game. You know, they actually have soldiers on the front lines. The Ukrainians are now claiming that the North Koreans are back again fighting, by the way. They were all dead, and now they're all alive, and now they're all dead again. Now they're all alive. Gotta love it. Wendy's. You're asking me if I want to collab with Wendy's. Come on, bruh. I wasn't born yesterday. Kalibrated at 40 minutes, 30 seconds into the stream, you literally said the U.S. would not throw Ukraine under the bus. Bro, you have to add context. What was I specifically talking about? Did I say I don't think that the U.S. would completely just drop Ukraine like a ton of bricks? Because they're not. That's not what they're doing. It's very clear that that's not what they're doing. You would have to add context. I'm telling you, you have social media, right? Go get a Twitter account, clip it, send it to me, and we'll have a discussion. But you can't just say you said one thing at this time. I've said a million things in the hundreds of thousands of hours that I've done. Not hundreds and thousands of hours that I've done live streams. The next USA vassal had better treat Uncle Sam with a great deal of suspicion. Yeah, well, they're not going to. I was actually just talking to Brian Berletic from the New Atlas about this, and he was talking about some conversations he was having with people in the region, and it sounds like the same naivety. So, nope. Why do you think Poroshenko mentioned such a specific date of the 26th of October 2025 for Ukraine elections in Ukraine? I don't know. Probably just 6 months away. Calibrated. Did you see Telegraph's piece on what Trump is offering to Ukraine? 50% resource extraction revenues, 50% values of third-party licenses, right of first refusal and liens. No, I didn't. Can you actually send that to me? I'll take a look at that. I haven't seen that on the Telegraph. Question. That's true for non-Western superpowers as well. It's like you're expecting anything different except reality. Islamic Caliphate have partnered with Christians to defeat other Muslims. Oh, okay. Yeah, now you're going off the rails. I don't know what we're talking about here. I don't think any of the people who are making decisions anywhere are Christians, Muslims, or Jews. I'm just letting you know. I think they're sociopaths who think that they're more powerful than God. I think that's who you're pretty much dealing with. When you have to lie and cheat and get, and do terrible things to get your way to the top, and then you continue doing terrible things to stay at the top, you're not a super religious person. Just hope everybody knows you don't really believe in the Bible or stuff like that when you're, invading Syria. Like, come on, guys. Even medieval Europe, the conquests into the Middle East by the the knights, and by Britain and France. That all that is not religious either. That's just, again, just using religion as an excuse. Can the Gazans expect better love from the Yanks? Nope. Crusades, yeah. I always say conquests, bro. My brain is fried right now. Yeah, Crusades. Thank you guys. Crusades. Can't remember Zaluzhny. Can't remember the Crusades. Question: what will happen to Zelensky after the war ends? What will he do? Retire to a foreign country and probably be an exiled government, or he might actually just lose an election and just kind of get to leave. Never forget the Fourth Crusade. Yeah, I won't. It's right here, locked away. All right, guys. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for watching. Been an hour and 5 minutes. I appreciate you all so much. Be sure to go check out my Twitter and my Telegram. Click that subscribe button if you have not. I appreciate you all for being in here today. Make sure I got all these questions. Yes, I did. Thank you guys for your questions. Thank you guys for supporting me and my channel. I will see you guys probably. I'm going to try to do a live stream on Thursday, a late live stream Thursday. So yeah, we check in then. We should have more map updates by then for sure too as well. All right, guys, be safe. Goodbye.